Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GameSoundCon Sound Design Demo Derby for 2022. We're joined today with Scott Gershin, Shannon Potter, and Brad Beaumont. So, who wants to go first?
Good
go,
stuff.
Brad?
Yeah, sure. Good stuff, Mike. Yeah, so I think my first initial reaction, I'm just gonna go with my gut. I think my biggest piece of feedback is just I think the consistency in the quality of effects that you used and samples was a little bit wide. I think we start off right off the top with really nice, rich, horse bridle and saddle foley and things like that, and it feels really full and thick. And then as we start to progress into the action sequence, some of the fighting and things like that, there's sort of a disparity between some of the fidelity in the samples that you use that sort of pulled my ear a little bit and just sort of took me out of some of the spots. I think additionally, taking some time and building out larger libraries for stuff like footsteps, and maybe also giving a little bit more nuance to some of the different actions that are taking place. There was a lot of repetition in footsteps and things like that. It's kind of takes you out of it when you're trying to build something really immersive like this Elder Scrolls game. So that was my biggest critique, was just the, again, disparity kind of in the quality and detail of the samples. Nice, like, environments. There was a nice um good sense of the world, good sense of what was going on around me. And I think that you got out of it when the battle started. It was nice room left in there for what was going on. But I think you can go a little bit more over the top and a little bit more kind of in your face with some of the spells and things like that. Again, I think a lot of it just has to do with making sure all that, the samples and everything that you're using are, kind of feel like they're in the same ballpark in terms of fidelity, just to kind of keep you immersed in the scene. But overall, really nice coverage. I think, you hit all the big gameplay moments fairly well. And yeah, good stuff.
First off, I totally agree with Brad. I could have used a little more variation in the Foley, but overall, excellent coverage. A few things that I noticed with the whooshes, some of the sword whooshes felt a little bit heavy to me. And maybe could have been layered with maybe a higher pitched whoosh to give them a little bit of speed. Um, I loved the elements that you used for the horse running in. You can hear the gear movement. I do feel like there's a moment that it felt a little bit cluttered and could have been refined a little bit, almost like I was hearing a couple of horses run as opposed to just one. And a lot of times, for me, it's all about the rhythm of the horse. And I think this would be subtractive. It's almost like you need to carve a little bit of the gear movement and some of the feet out a little bit just to make it a little more succinct. And I know that's tough because it's just a very short piece. Um, I really like what you did with your abilities. I like how each ability had its own unique character, whether it was like the electricity or the fire. I felt like we probably could have heard a little bit more impact on some of the enemies. So there's kind of a cast and the impact just didn't seem quite as impactful. And there is one ability, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. It looks like it's the one ability that's focused on towards the end, and it has this really nice ramp, but it doesn't really come to a climax. And it occurred to me that that could have been a choice, because it sounds like the sword hit directly after that is filtered. So maybe that is what you were factoring into this particular type of ability. Maybe you wanted to duck all the audio during that moment. But for me, first listening to this, it seemed like it was a powering up type sound. So I wanted it to climax with like a really big sword flourish in that moment. But again, that could be totally subjective. But overall, coverage was great. I think just in a few spots, there were a few body falls missing. But those were usually in the distance. So yeah, great job.
So here's my thoughts. I think that I like the movement of the horse, but I thought, when you first hit a scene, just because of the way this demo is put together, it would have been nice to have big hoofs. So it hits it hard at the very beginning when we're seeing it. No, it's gameplay, but it'd be nice to go, here's the threat. And then when the horse turns, the horse really wants to move, and it controls the horse. So we've got the vocal there when he's turning the horse. The shields, I thought, were a bit boxy and they were very pitchy. It would have been nice to have more metal, more variations when the sword hits, the type of shield hits, what's not like clock, 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 like clock, 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 like some swords are ringing out, some are muted. So now it feels like a very complex percussion piece, very musical. I do agree with the footsteps. They needed more variety, different volumes. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you don't. You don't need to always hear it. I think I mentioned like the sword, when it hits it, you can just really make it kind of neat and have a certain amount of drama from it. I think the coverage was good, but now how do you make it exciting? I think with the hero glow, it was neat, but I said, okay, it's going, and it didn't take me. It didn't take me the rest of the way. I wanted to hear something where you felt like the enemies, it's really dangerous. It's power, giving me more of that. Oh yeah, because you want to be able to get absorbed into it. I'm also a big proponent of vocal hits. To humanize it, so when people are getting hit, especially the enemies, and you're exerting, and now all of a sudden it's exciting because there's a human aspect to it. That to me will take it and amp it up a lot more. So when you look at your piece, you can make it more dramatic, make the highs, make the lows, which can even be built into gameplay, how you integrate it in. But as a demo, I would have just made it a little more fun and a little, just to show the awesome, cool, God, that's neat vibe. It's all about vibe and getting a visceral response from it.
Yeah, I would plus one that note for sure. That's one thing I failed to mention. Yeah, I think just having the human element missing made it feel a little bit sterile, and I think that another thing I was going to say, I was just rewatching it again on the side. I think taking the time to, when you're doing the mix pass and kind of, you've got all your elements together, you've designed, you've edited, you've thinned things out, you've made your choices, and you're actually mixing, really taking some time to make all those elements feel like they're living in the same space. I think that calls back to some of the original things I said, just about the quality and sort of the not only quality and fidelity, but quality and like the timbre and just sort of the tonality and everything of the effects themselves. I think some of them, feel like they're living in different spaces. Scott hit on a good point about the sort of the pitchiness of the shield hits in some cases, and I think that sort of because of that pitchiness, that real transient metal ticky, kind of exacerbated the vibe of those things feeling a little bit interior, or just kind of feeling a little bit dead, not really living in the space as much. So something else to consider. I know this is a lot of like, yeah, you had good coverage, but here's a lot of stuff that you didn't do well. But that's kind of part of this, right? So don't get discouraged overall.
All of this is learning.
Yeah, for sure. Really, really good stuff. Just keep going,
And you know something which does, and this is for everybody who's listening, sometimes adding a little bit of a slap can sustain sounds and make it a little cooler. It's outside, so you can't really go with a reverb, but there's certain tricks you can do with EQ'd based delays or slap delays or pre-delayed reverb with a really short reflection that will just give it this little slap bounce. It could be between castle, walls, and again, anything to make it more exciting and to vary it up. And also, one of the things I noticed with young sound designers, a lot of people end up making everything, I call it monotone. And what I mean by that is it's all one volume. It's like everything is always doing this. And it's neat when you can have now all of a sudden it adds a dynamic, and it just adds a certain excitement rather than everything being up front. And same thing with what Brad was saying in the space. Not everything should live on a single plane, because then everything just feels mono-y, not mono spatially, but just kind of one notey. And you want to add, what's important, what's the kill shots, what's deadly, what's going to amp up the big hits. How do I tell the big hits from the small hits, or the slides, or the scrapes, or the little experiment with that and what that actually means. Some really interesting stuff here. I think there's Odyssey, I believe the first one was a cinematic. I think you can hit the cuts to add more energy because it's a cinematic, it's not necessarily gameplay. So when Witcher is putting it, first I would start it even Cheetah, like a big start makes people go, oh wow, that's cool. Then as it's hitting the creature and the creature's yelling, I would add, in other words, make it more painful. And you could even add impacts to the Witcher's energy beam. So it just makes it more, because you really want to feel the pain. I liked a lot of the stuff that you did, but I thought you could have just made it a little more dramatic and amp the creature so the cries become more intense, because now he's actually hurting this creature, or the creature's frustrated, wanting to fight back and is getting pissed off. So now you're starting to see a battle, not just the Witcher just killing something. It really wants to be that there's a fight that's really happening. I think I like the crossbow. I think the body falls, I know it's coming from different pieces here. The body falls could be bigger. I mean, when that thing lands, it should be when that thing lands, it should be just big and weighty, that feels that the Witcher may not make it. Even though the Witcher's winning, the enemy is dangerous. Cyber sounds. I like some of the cyber sounds. It's a little classic video gamey. It would have been fun to, like, when the eye, when it's at the door, like that part. It would have been fun to have it growl, kind of do like a weird kind of fun signature sound of the robot at the doorway when it's doing that. That could have been just kind of a tasty little fun piece. One of the things I've noticed overall is there were some interesting sounds, but they could be phrased a little bit better. And what I mean by that is clap, 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 clap. Like, even like when Spider-Man was punching him, it never got intense. It never built anything. It's just punch, 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 rather than punch, 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 punch. There's so many ways you can do that through integration, and Odyssey through linear is quite a bit easier. But there's ways to make it much more like the blows are landing a little bit harder. I think you could phrase things, you could do things through whooshes where they blend in together to feel like more musical, more rhythmical. One of the things that's interesting with games that I learned even as early on as Gears of War 1,000 years ago, sometimes games get really intense where you're just going at it, and this becomes a lot of energy and a lot of testosterone, and it becomes a lot of chaos. Chaos can be really cool in video games because it amps up the player. Try to get that point. So when Spider-Man's just going at it, it's like, and all of a sudden it's getting to a crescendo. I think of everything musical is just the way my lizard brain thinks, but I like it to feel like I'm going somewhere. I'm going, yeah. Now all of a sudden, I'm in the game. I'm winning. I'm doing it well. So whether it's The Witcher, whether it's Spider-Man, I would definitely go in those areas. And I think the more video game with the little robot cyber guy, again, some really cool stuff. I think you could be brilliant by adding a little comedy, a little bit of neat design on the vocal, just make somebody, there's so many cool games. Angry Birds. I mean, there's so many great signature sounds. You could put one of those in that makes it, oh my God, that's hilarious. It makes people smile, or makes people just react in kind of oh, that's just kind of tasty and cool. There you
go. So first off, great job overall. Really nice coverage. For me, I'm missing on the Witcher piece, I'm missing the creature movement. We have this big run by of this giant bird creature, and I'm really missing the heavy feet hitting the ground. You get the body fall later, but you don't really get the feet. I have to agree with Scott. I could have used a little bit more out of the vocals. Something a little more nuanced in between the screams. Sometimes I find like an inhale or a gurgle or an exhale layered in between kind of really brings a creature to life. So it would really be just kind of speckling in a little bit more detail. Let's see here. Nice gear movement on the player. Oh, for the fire ability, I feel like this could have benefited from a mix pass and forcing the perspective a little bit for that fire spell, because I believe when it opens up, it's on the player, and then we have the cuts where you cut to a close-up of the creature. I think you can really play with the intensity of that spell, maybe bring in some more high-end fire crackle and sizzle when it's close up on the creature, and then maybe even speckling in some more painful creature vocals to really amp up the drama in that moment. For the 2D game, I really loved the palette that you used. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was very consistent all the way through. I think you could go through and do another pass and add in, you know, the personality elements that Scott was talking about. And then maybe even add a little bit of physicality to kind of like that big metal robot. Because you have some really nice tonal content, and I really like how the opening, you really set the mood, and it's a very moody opening, and that really worked for me. For Spider-Man, I felt like most of the combat felt pretty satisfying, but I totally understand, Scott, where you're coming from, making it more dynamic and, you know, ba ba ba, you know, giving it some rhythm and movement. I totally agree with that. The other thing is for the web spit, I would love it to be a little more punchy on the shoot, just a little bit at the top, just to punctuate that a little bit more. And I think some of the body falls were missing on a few of the characters, and that's just a detail pass, but overall, great job.
Cool. I would say, first off, as somebody who has graded or listened to hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of demos over my years at Riot, I really appreciate the breadth of and the variety in the clips that you provided. It's cool to see, you know, something a bit more realistic, cinematic with the Witcher clip, then kind of getting into more stylized, quirky, fun stuff with the 2D Unity platformer, and then Octopath kind of showing the sort of like traditional RPG aesthetic, and then into Spider-Man, which is kind of like more modern, you know, theatrical kind of combat. Really, really cool to see that breadth. So good on you for that. Getting into the individual clips, Shannon and Scott already had a lot of really great points. Right off the bat on The Witcher, the biggest thing that caught me was probably the vocals for the bird. I think it's already been said, but I think giving a little bit more variety and sort of giving that bird a bit more fight in its vocals would kind of make the fight seem like it had bigger stakes. It kind of felt like pretty one-sided, and I didn't really feel like there was any imminent danger for the protagonists there. But in addition to that, I think the fire spell that Shannon was speaking to, she was right on the money in terms of what I was thinking as far as playing up the perspective a bit more. There was a lot of spots where it reminded me of that fight between Voldemort and Dumbledore in I think Order of the Phoenix. There's a lot of really cool perspective cuts when they're just sort of dueling with wands, and you know their spells are bouncing off each other, and there's really cool perspective switches when you get close up on them. You feel the sizzle and the crackle and all the spitting of all the, you know, the spells coming from their wands and things like that. I think you could probably do something similar here to kind of amp up the drama. On the Unity 2D side scroller, really fun stylized sound design. I think it was kind of a cool mix of you know, higher fidelity, sort of retro-y synthetic sound design with like little touches and embellishments of like organic stuff. I kind of wish there was a bit more of a balance between the sort of organic grounded stuff as well as the stylized synthetic stuff. I think Scott had a similar comment. Cool stuff though, really fun palette, really consistent, as Shannon mentioned. I think there's probably some room to improve on gameplay clarity in that clip a little bit. I think there was a lot of cool sounds, but watching back the clip a few times, it was sometimes hard to follow what was, you know, what certain attacks were coming from the boss. And I think in a game like that, it's really important to have those gameplay cues be really consistent and really kind of different, you know, from moment to moment. So if it's like a long, you know, bomb attack versus like a laser homing missile kind of attack, just having something that's really, really definitively different. So that's like a good gameplay cue for the player. But overall, really cool stuff. Octopath, like just really fun, faithful RPG sound design. Good stuff there. Good coverage. And then on Spider-Man, I probably had a lot of the same comments. Scott had a lot of really great notes about rhythm and pacing. I kind of just wish there was a bit more, I think a bit more something signature and iconic with the web slinging itself. And then also I wish I would have felt a bit more immersed in the scene, like in the world, like backgrounds and environments, having that be built out a little bit more. And I think it could have also benefited a lot from just having a dialogue component, some kind of vocal stuff to kind of make that feel fun. I think it was Scott that mentioned, having it feel fun, a little bit more playful. And I think that would have really amped up the drama and just sort of the fun factor, like hearing Spidey and the enemies. But again, overall, awesome stuff. Really cool, really strong demo. And yeah, good job.
Awesome. Before we move on, are there any tech tips and tricks that you guys would want to offer on how to achieve some of those notes?
For the low price of $39.99. I'm just kidding.
I mean, I'll say that there are amazing libraries out there. I mean, obviously, sometimes you want to record stuff. Sometimes there's an amazing amount of libraries, really high quality out there. And then if you work facilities, a lot of those facilities have the libraries. So what I always look for people is, do they have good instinct? The libraries are important, but if I expose somebody who's got good instincts to a good library, they'll know how to use it. So then it becomes easy. Then it's about, I always equate sound effects to music. To me, that sometimes is very similar, and that music adds an emotional component. And I know I've been saying that in the last two that we've done, but I do like the musicality. I like the low end hits. Sometimes there's these low, wow, big threatening. I love vocalizations in a lot of stuff, and there's so many great ways to take metal. I mean, the sound designer's paradise is Home Depot. I mean, you go there and you bang things around and you blow into things and you growl into things and you look crazy, but it's just a wonderful place to find things. Gun cocks can be a fence, a lock, there's so many great little gadgets. Your house, your neighbor's house, your neighbor's house, they have cool cars and cool dogs and doors and creaks and kids and baby. There's so much great sound that you can record and manipulate either through Pro Tools, through Reaper, through Radium. There's all these amazing tools. And the other part is, which I wish I had when I started, I've become a YouTube junkie. There's so many great things on YouTube to learn. I know I'm a bit of a freak, but I probably spend about an hour and a half every day, maybe sometimes 2 hours on YouTube, doing a lot of audio stuff, things, whether it's musical or not, that just inspire me or that's really interesting. So there's a wonderful resource out there.
+1 everything Scott just said, because he's a very smart man. I would also say too, I really don't think, I mean, this might be controversial, but I don't think you can be a really great sound designer until you're a really great editor first. And Scott sort of touched on something that I think is really important. It's like having that instinct and knowing what sounds good is sort of the first, well, maybe not the first, but one of the earlier battles that you get through. And yeah, having an amazing library and having great people around you that can design amazing things from scratch. Taking that, learning what sounds good and cutting that into your stuff. And then, at some point, once you kind of get comfortable with that, figuring out how do I make that sonic paint that those awesome people like the Scott Gershins of the world, that I used to listen to his stuff and Peter Zinda's stuff and Harry Cohen's stuff and Ian Chabelli's stuff and Tim Walston's stuff. I'm going to use their stuff to make awesome stuff. And then, I'll get around to figuring out how to make my own awesome stuff, which, it takes a while. So, find out what sounds good, build up your taste, and, get a good ear for what good quality, what high quality sound is, because that's one thing that I've seen too in a lot of demos is people think, well, I just graduated school, I'm a sound designer now. And it's like, you see these people that may have the very noble goal to record everything themselves in their apartments with, a microphone and a little Zoom recorder and a bunch of stuff in their bathroom. And it is a noble goal, but it doesn't sound great. And there's a reason, right? A for effort, but the execution just isn't there. And, at the end of the day, we're trying to make things that sound amazing and really high quality. So, so I'm repeating myself a lot, but that taste component is really, really important. I'm glad Scott touched on that. It's good advice.
+2 on everything Brad and Scott have said. I just want to add, I was thinking about creature vocals. Don't be afraid to record your own voice to get the kind of emotion that you're looking for, and perhaps trying to blend it in with the creature. And that takes some finessing for sure. But often I find when you've tried every type of pitch variance possible with the creature vocal, it just doesn't get you there. And sometimes you need to record supplemental material to really get the emotion out of the creature, because the biggest point is if a creature gets hit, it needs to sound painful. I always tell people, close your eyes when you're listening. If you don't know exactly what is happening to that creature, then do it again. Yeah.
And I'll just show an example. Home Depot, and just doing stuff through resonance. And I've got lots of weird stuff that you can just do, and then you take it and you pitch it and compress it, and so many cool things. And I'll say this, I think for the people that aren't working yet or going to be working, it's actually a very special moment. And let me explain why. There's no pressure. There's only imagination to do weird things. Scream into a toilet bowl and record it, whatever. There's no right, there's no wrong. There's all about experimenting. What's great is when you start doing that and you start getting a vocabulary in your head of what things sounds like, what happens is when you become a professional, which means just getting paid to do it, now you've got to go at a certain speed, and you're always weighing it. I'm a freelancer. I don't work in house. So they want a list of sounds and how it's going to be put in, and there's a time frame based on it, rather than I'm on a project for 2 years in house. It's a different dynamic. So I've got to come up with sounds like a studio player, pretty cool stuff pretty quickly. And so I have to really think differently. But when you're younger, I was doing weird stuff like on the music front, take a guitar amp, put it under the piano, take the strings, put it on sustain, and mic the piano, not the amp. And you're getting all these really sympathetic vibrations. Think out there, taking mics and rubbing things against the mic for whooshes, or, there's so many creative ideas. Play with it because there's no pressure. Then when you get to the point when you're starting to work and get a gig, and now you're trying to prove yourself, well, now there's a time component tied to it, but you'll have this wealth of experimentation. That's like it.
Yeah, and I think with that experimentation, like, reach out to people that are doing it professionally and say, what do you think about this? And you could reach out to 10 people and 9 of them might ignore you, but one of them might reach back on LinkedIn or something like that. I try to reach back to people, and just reach out for that feedback, because you're not going to know how you're doing if you're not reaching out. So do all that weird stuff and play it for people. You might be surprised who reaches out.
Yeah, I totally agree. The demoing phase is so incredibly important. having as many people review your material and getting the feedback and actually doing a round of feedback and then getting additional notes, that is how you grow and that is how you learn.
And it doesn't matter how big you are, because I've worked with both Brad and Shannon, and theoretically at that point it was the grand poobah, but I would always go to them. Hey, come to my room. What do you think? So it's not how long you've been doing, because it comes down to the guttural feel, and they go, cool. Did I hit that note? So it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Not quite. Brittle! Better switch weapons and hit it before it thaws! It's dead. Finally.
Wow, Wayne, you've been really busy. There is so much material to chew on with this demo. Overall, fantastic coverage. And I really like how different each piece is, which, as Brad mentioned earlier, it gives you a really good idea of someone's ability to have this much different content. I'm seeing a common theme across a lot of these demos. I'm wanting a little bit more focus. I'm hearing a lot of sound coming at me, and sometimes it's hard to know where I'm at in the game. We'll start with Cyberpunk. I'm really missing some basic Foley on the character moving through the world, starting out just opening the door, the hands on the door. I'm hearing the door itself, but I'm not actually hearing the player move through the world. Hands the door. There are a few of the enemy characters where the sword is flying through, it hits the character, and you're not really hearing the impact. So again, missing just some of that tactile Foley. That would have been really helpful. For the next clip, again, great coverage, lots of detail. I feel like the laser weapon could have used a little bit of supplementation, maybe even a mechanism sound or just kind of some low end punch to fill it out a little bit more. Really nice job on your slow motion element, and great job with your, I think it's like an electricity ability. Next piece, Andromeda. This one I felt could have benefited from some panning. I think there were, and I may be getting ahead of myself, but I think there were a few ship buys of the smaller aircrafts that I wasn't really getting any movement. And that's a spot where you can make it really dramatic with flybys. Similar case for the lasers. We have a lot of laser fire coming in, and I felt like it would have been really cool to have some variation on the types of lasers, and then really focusing on the impacts. And I think maybe the thought process is, oh, they're distant. You don't need to hear them as much, but to me, it made them less impactful. I think the largest aircraft could have used some movement sounds to really give the weight when you first see that aircraft approach. And as far as some of the crashes go, it would have been great to get some of the metal exploding on those crashes. For the large cannon, so I think I'm going to go back to the beginning. There's the large cannon type weapon. I really think what you have there is cool, but if you could have supplemented it with some really heavy metal mechanisms like and putting some punctuation on each movement, that would have made that really pop. For the automata piece, I think here's another case of I'm hearing a lot of sounds. I'm hearing a lot of whooshes. I'm hearing a lot of bullets, but I'm not really sure where it's coming from and what the focus should be. I think oftentimes, and I did this early on, you feel like, well, there's bullets flying and there's sword whooshes. I need to put everything in there to make sure I have all the detail. But I think you can play with the perspective and mix certain things up and down, or even take certain things away that just aren't important in the moment to really carve out what should I be focusing on. I really like the sound of the robot hitting the wall. You had a nice lead into that, which that's something that a lot of young designers forget. They do the heavy impact, but they don't do the lead in into the impact, which really helps it feel much more dramatic. So great job on that. Let's see, Horizon. Again, really nice elements, great detail. I could have used more detail on the creature. Creature movement on the ground, and then when it first comes out, it should sound kind of explosive coming out of the ground. It should be like a really frightening moment. I think some of the Foley on the footsteps, and again, this is a minor note because you only hear her footsteps like a little, they felt a little repetitive to me. The last note I would have is there's some UI towards the end, and that wasn't covered. I feel like that's a missed opportunity because that's also a way to, show your skill set by just adding the full coverage of the UI on the screen for your demo. I was just kind of missing that. Even though that isn't technically in gameplay, I think it's a great thing to add. Anyways, good job. I think that's all I've got for now.
Brad, you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of really, really great notes from Shannon. I will try not to repeat what she said. Yeah, I think overall, great job in terms of just, getting a lot of content down, getting a really robust demo together. There's a lot of stuff, as Shannon mentioned. And I think that might be maybe my biggest critique is just, it's kind of a lot. It's a kind of just a sonic assault on the viewer, and there's a little bit of kind of sameness in a couple of the clips, specifically like the first the first clip was the Cyberpunk clip, and then we go into the Mass Effect 3 clip. I might just pick one of those and really spend some extra time, some extra TLC on hitting some of the notes that Shannon mentioned, like really filling out some of the gaps where Foley could be. Maybe extending out that Cyberpunk clip a little bit more so that we have, a little less of a frenetic entrance into the demo, right? Maybe something that just kind of like leads us in and then, amps up. Something that's going to give the whole demo watching experience just a little bit more of an ebb and flow, just because there is so much content in here. And a lot of it is very bombastic, in your face, which is not a bad thing, but yeah, I think getting a little bit more granular with some of this feedback. Yeah, I think on the cyberpunk bit, kind of hard to follow a little bit in terms of what was going on. I think grounding the player character, the first person, entity in some kind of a Foley situation, something that feels grounded to that, maybe some breaths and efforts, just sort of grunts and all that kind of stuff as he's interacting with the environment and fighting would help a little bit, and making sure that you're hitting those spots where doors are being touched. There's we open with that door ripping open, and it just there's a general sound of that happening, but I'm kind of missing the detail there. So I think a really thoughtful Foley pass would kind of really help elevate that clip. The Mass Effect clip, once you get into some of the hand-to-hand combat stuff, I think there's some really nice meaty impacts and punches and fight stuff going on, really cool, like leathery like suit impacts and kicks and stuff like that. But similar to it was Mike's clip, there's kind of a disparity in the quality and fidelity of the sounds that are being used, because we're hearing some of that really nice, full, rich, and meaty Foley impact stuff. But then when we've got the laser pistol right in our face, I'm expecting nice mechanism, some kind of a charge up, and it feels kind of really mid-heavy and kind of more of a lower fidelity sound. So something to look at. Getting into Andromeda, I wasn't sure where you were going in terms of like the overall aesthetic. Anytime we're dealing with space battles, there's always the question of, is space silent? Like, how much are we going to play up? Like, what is it going to be? Are we going to do the Star Wars treatment, or whatever? And again, like, just a little bit of disparity in like kind of the EQing of sounds. I wasn't sure if we were going to get more of that kind of like low pass, kind of muffled, boomy space kind of battle thing that we hear sometimes. I think it was like with Battlestar Galactica. Is that the show that did the
the second incarnation?
Yeah. Some of those I don't know, going with that kind of a treatment could be interesting, but there's sort of like a half in, half out in the way that you approach this one. So there was some really high fidelity, high pitchy servo-y stuff, pitchy like laser stuff, and then other booms and explosions and stuff that were in our face. It felt a little bit more low pass. So maybe just sort of taking a step back and figuring out what's your overall kind of aesthetic for that one. But there's some cool stuff going on, cool sci-fi laser designs and blasts and stuff like that. Really fun stuff. Let's see. I'm going to skip ahead. So we've got Automata and Horizon. Again, I think just having a bit more consistency in terms of how much you're covering Foley and where you're hitting those moments would be helpful. Just more consistency so that as a player, as a listener, as a viewer, I'm sort of I can trust what I'm going to hear. You know what I mean, in terms of gameplay feedback. So that's one thing to consider, especially with a game like Automata. Horizon. I'm trying to remember here what my notes were. I think of all the clips, that one felt maybe the most put together in terms of just environmental, the environment being built out. We had dialogue in that. We had some efforts and vocals. We had creature stuff. We had weapon stuff. We had environmental explosions and things like that. But I think, again, just sort of taking a step back and evaluating the dynamics of the whole scene and finding places to let things breathe and let things it'll just make those moments that are huge pop more when you have some room to breathe beforehand. But overall, that's a lot of work, so kudos, good job.
Well, first, I agree with both Shannon and Brad. What I think, everybody who's watching this and all the designers, it's always good because especially when we're trying to do demos, you want to impress people. And so you have a certain amount of control linearly, but you still want to make it feel like it could be done in a game. When I look at a cinematic, I start plotting out the moments that I think are big or that are memorable. So like the robot hitting, which Shannon said, but boy, I think you missed an opportunity to go, could have been a really cool personality when the head went down. You look at every shot, you know, if you ever studied art, great art, your eye automatically goes to one thing, then it goes to a second thing, and then it goes to a tertiary thing. Every great show, every great painting, the painter makes it through colors, shadows, that there's a primary, secondary, tertiary. Same thing with audio. You want to be able to say, I'm going to hit this primary, the ship that's coming at us. If you're trying to be, oh, that's awesome. It's now all of a sudden it's coming, it's a threat. Okay, so I go, all right, that's a threat. The weapons, the question is it going to be big sounding or is it going to be anti-sounding, like quiet? Couple ways to play that, but you need to decide what your biggest moments are, what are the secondary, what are the tertiary, and then what are the small little movements. I mean, I'm just gonna say on the movie side, I did a robot creature movie a while back, and there's I have to figure out at any given time, you know, what do I want to hear? Who do I want to hear? From a linear standpoint. Same thing with games. A lot of times when I do games, I want to know what are my biggest sounds, what are my baddest sounds, where's the top? I don't go bottom up. Many sound designers want to go, let me start with backgrounds and let me start building up. The problem is you have a ceiling on the loudest sounds you can do. The way I think of sound is go backwards. I start at the top and work down because it's the mixer side of me because I do a lot of mixing. I can't add a lot more sound, but I could take things away. And when you take away, you start getting detail and you start dealing with what's called masking of what things are masking and other sounds. So when you're going for the biggest sounds, you're gonna go, oh, that one's gonna be a low end whack. That's gonna be a cool. Here's a funny thing. Okay, there's a funny little. So a lot of times what I will do within my DAW is I will start putting markers to be able to accentuate stuff. So the metal door. And lastly, I'll say is I think all music and all sound effects are dealing what's called tension and release. I create a tension, and there's a release, and there's another tension. Good stories are written that way. Great music's written that way. And I think sound design, all the sound design you should listen to, I'm going to create a release. I'm going to create a tension. So when the door opens, now all of a sudden you hear the tension, it releases up. I think that there's some missing stabs, a couple little things that could have been there. I thought the weapons when it first happened, and again, I'm sorry my notes weren't based on each one, but so there's missing a little bit of low end, some intimidation. Again, you should look at that and say, okay, I want to be intimidating here. I want to do this here. There's some really cool high-tech sounds I liked. It was really interesting because there were some sounds I really dug, and I'm like, oh, this is really good. And other sounds I thought were wanting. So I felt that sometimes young sound designers would just put cool sounds up. That's cool, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. But they're not what I call phrasing. They're not taking it somewhere. They're not going, we're going to build here. Remember those markers I was discussing? You got to build up. You got to go down. The only way to go big is to go down and then go back big. There's an old Hollywood trick where you drop one frame before an explosion because you're getting the silence. And if anything, you're letting the speakers go back and then hit again. You can't go big and then have the speakers be bigger. It's always about contrast. And I think it's the same thing with the video games, by how many voice counts you want, how much what kind of sounds you're using, what's playing, what's dropping out. There's a lot of really cool ways you can integrate in the gaming side to be able to have similar impact that you do linearly. I think you've got really good instincts. In regards to the dragon caterpillar, to me, when I first saw that, that's the big moment. I think it was a missed moment. I think when that thing was coming up, it should be all-encompassing threat. This thing's going to eat me. And you've got to let the viewer know, you know, kind of sound. And then you do, that's the tension. There's the release. And some of the vertical ships, I thought it couldn't be like, you know, all of a sudden cavity's really high. And whether you want to use the typical, you know, everyone's using the tremolation buys, or you want to do a vocal by or an animal by, or there's so many palettes that we all use out there. And just by watching movies and games, there's so much inspiration out there. Listen. That's all I got. Nice. Can I go first on this one?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I really like this one. I think there's a lot of wonderful stuff in here. I almost feel like I just wanted to go a little more. So let me start talking about the creature at the beginning. I don't know why I liked it. It would have been nice to give a little spatial delay to it. I think the vocabulary, which I thought was interesting, could have been a little more varied, a little more emotive. One of the greatest things, if anyone's ever not seen Cirque du Soleil, they speak Cirque language. So no matter what country you're from, everybody knows what they're thinking. Right? They're making all these sounds, but you always know, no matter what language you speak, what the intent of the clowns are, the performers. I think the same thing with the creature. I thought you had something really interesting. I would have liked to heard more emotion, more things that are going on. I also think that the vocals need a little more impact because they're like, just give me something like something variety, a little more intensity. Right now, it sort of felt like, oh, I like it. Wait a minute, I'm missing a couple things. So I felt like you were on a really good road. I just wanted you to go a little further with it down this. I really like the dynamics, something I've been talking about the other three. Like when the weapon, the vertical weapon comes, I thought that was nice. Nice tension and release. I felt that there were areas where like there were air distortions, like bubbles. Thought they needed more. I think you missed a little bit on that front where I felt like I wanted to hear some cool ear candy. Kind of something that made me go, ooh, that's kind of a neat weapon. Because the thing is, as a player, you become the character and you want to get excited by the weapons you have. And the sword whooshes, I'd add a little more metal, to them, or other elements. I'd beef them up a little bit, but I thought it was really cool. I liked the big ground explosion. The magic weapon hits, I think they needed more complexity. It's like I liked where you were going. It just needed more air candy, something a little more interesting. The whooshes, a little more variety. I need the impacts to be a little more painful. Just making them a little more like they're hitting hard. But I kind of liked that. I liked the snow. I liked sort of where you were going with that. I thought I saw one quick section on the second piece that when they were jumping, they had like a little hexagon energy shield. I heard a little sound, but it would have been neater to have something pop a little more, that I would have noticed it, because I saw for a second, and I just thought there was kind of it could be a little bit more, but I thought a really nice job. I think, if one of my editors were doing, I'd say, great, that's like the first rough pass. Now we're going to refine it, take it. But I thought your instincts were good. I think it just needs that. Okay, you're hitting all the points like I mentioned before, the tension releases. You're doing a lot of that stuff. Now I just need more variety with the creature. Just give it the extra 20%.
Yeah, great job. I think Scott's notes were great. Really spot on. I will +1 those. I think for me on the Wukong clip, Scott hit on sort of the wanting to hear a little bit more spatialization on the enemy's vocals. I think there was some sort of the beginnings of a really cool creature vocal palette there. Again, more variety, as Scott mentioned, a little bit more impact, more like that would kind of give it a more visceral, threatening kind of quality. But yeah, just feeling it in that space. It's a big, open, airy, cold battlefield. Kind of feeling that vocal sort of permeate and sort of exist in the space a bit more would kind of sell it from a realistic standpoint. And then I think with the I wasn't sure initially when the clip started, the footsteps to me, I wasn't sure if we were going to be seeing sort of the some of the same challenges that a couple of the other clips had, where there was sort of like a sameness about the Foley movements and stuff like that. So I wasn't sure what to expect when the actual, the battle kicked off. And I was really, really surprised with sort of the full fidelity, awesome stuff that was hitting us with the enemy sword, and those attacks and everything felt really threatening. Rewinding back, I kind of want a little bit more like love and care put into the initial snow footsteps, just to kind of feel a little bit more of that crunch, just something a little bit more subtle before the action really kicks off, and really can feel Wukong's Foley a bit more before we kind of get into it. But like I said, the attacks from the enemy were great, really, really weighty. I wasn't getting the same kind of impact and like sort of enjoyment from Wukong's attacks. Like as the player playing as Wukong, swinging that staff around, doing that, I wasn't getting that like satisfaction of those impacts as much as I was from the enemy attacking. So finding ways to really play up maybe some of the more exciting combos that he was doing, and we sort of see a little bit of like VFX, almost like screen distortion from like air distortion, where he's spinning his staff really quickly. I wanted to feel something like, I don't know, just kind of like air ripping or something, really quick whippy air whip, air distortion or something going on when he's spinning his staff around. But again, overall, really great job. The Wukong clip was great. Horizon, I thought there was really good, good environmental kind of scene setting going on as we get right into that clip. Just taking another quick little listen. Yeah, Scott mentioned some of the technology stuff felt like it could go a little bit more. I'll totally agree with that. I wanted to hear a little bit more contrast between sort of like the organic sort of tribal nature of everything that's going on, and then there's the technology and everything that exists at the same time. That contrast is kind of one of the fun parts of Horizon, and I'm missing that a little bit. And then I'd look out for let's see, I think it's about whenever the like the robot mech dino comes in. Apologies for not knowing the exact name of that, but I'd look out for the persistent low end and the persistent bass that was going on with that. Cool to hear that really impactful thing trigger when he stomps in, and that initial fire burst. But there was a lot of lingering just low end energy that was just sort of not doing much for the clip as you kind of got out of it. So I think hitting those moments with the low end real quick, get in, get out. If there's persistent low end that you need to have, just be mindful of that eating up your headroom, causing ear fatigue and all that kind of stuff. But again, great job, really cool stuff, and yeah, well done.
Cool. Lots of great notes from Brad and Scott. So I don't have a ton to add. Lots of great coverage. I really like the palette you chose on both. I'm gonna get nitpicky for a second on the Foley. I felt like the feet sound like the snow is a little bit more shallow than it is. I personally could have used a little bit of a wading through heavy snow feel in the very beginning, just on that short run up segment. And then after that, for the creature, I'm really missing the hand pounds and the scrape offs from the rock before it lands in the snow. Moving on to the combat, I really liked how some of the swords felt. I agree there could have been a little more flavor added with metallic elements, but there is one attack in particular from the creature where the sword was kind of comes slicing up through the center, and I thought what you did there was really cool and impactful. So great job with that. For the creature vocals, I agree with both Scott and Brad. Could have used some spatialization. On top of that, more emotion in some of the vocals. But there is at a certain point, and I think it's right before the battle starts, there's like this gurgly vocal that I thought was really cool. I really enjoyed that. For the Horizon clip, I don't have a ton to add here. I do like the palette that you use, great sounding material. I think this particular piece could have benefited from a mix pass. I felt like the perspective could have been pushed a little bit more. There was a lot going on. And I just had one side note, like towards the end, you're hearing a lot of that fire crackle, and it seems like that element should have been pushed back a little bit. So maybe going in and choosing what to focus on in each moment will help things be a little more distinct in the mix. But other than that, great job.
All right, so that's our last demo. Any other thoughts?
I'd say, kudos to all of you for, having the courage to put your stuff out there and kind of get beat up a little bit. Hopefully this was, helpful and constructive. All three of us have been in the same position, just kind of getting started out and putting our stuff in front of people, and it's always a little nerve-wracking. So, yeah, thanks for sharing. It's always fun to kind of hear people's approaches to things like this. So thank you.
Absolutely, and keep doing it.
Yeah.
And and absolutely, and I think that I've been doing this for a while. I always get nervous before a project, which is strange. People don't realize that, but I mean, yes, I know how to do a lot of stuff, but I want it to be different. I want it, there's so many times in our business, because of the schedules and different issues, that people will do the same tricks. Sometimes it makes sense to do similar tricks. Sometimes you want to push yourself in ways that you haven't pushed yourself, or like right now I've got a project coming up and I want to take a whole different approach. I want to get rid of everything the way I've done it, and I'm going to try to do a couple things differently just to see if I can do it, because I want to try to come up with a different result. Because if I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over and over, I don't feel as an artist that I'm growing the way I want to. And I think that's one of the great things about sound design, is that it is an art form. And sometimes you use a different brush, sometimes you do a different perspective, sometimes you have to fail. I even said to a client today, we were going through it, and I said, well, he goes, hey, well, we'll have a deadline here. And I went, can I do it 2 weeks after that? I want to fail a bunch. I want to go, I don't want to play it safe. I know I can give you what you want quickly, but I might give you something amazing if I can try a couple things and screw up, and know and feel comfortable that I have the time to be horrible, because we all have to do it, because we got to take chances. when we're all nervous, we don't take chances. We do what we know works. But sometimes what's fun is to get out of your comfort zone and to try something different, try a new tool, try a new plugin, try a new library, try to just do something whole another aspect of it. Use distortion, use synths, not use synths. I mean, again, it depends on what you want to accomplish. And it's going to sound bad, and that's okay, because eventually you're going to wait a minute. That's cool. Let me grow that concept, and then you build upon it. So I think that not being comfortable. So for all the people that are the great sound designers out there, getting out of that comfort zone, getting to the point where you always have time to do what you know how works, but now you're going to try to do something you don't know if it works. So and that's where I think experimenting, and I think it's kind of the challenge for the more seasoned guys or seasoned people, that it's easy to fall into your comfort zone, and I love when clients will allow us to get out of our comfort zone. So work it, and don't give up, because it'll sound like crap, and then it'll go ding, the little light comes on, and you'll feel wonderful, and then another light will come on, you'll feel wonderful, and then everyone else will be like, wow, you're really good, and you've got to be nuts, you got to be passionate, you've got to be crazy to do what we do, but the reality is we couldn't think about doing anything other than what we do. We just can't not do it. And hey, they pay us for it.
Scott had amazing notes there. Great thoughts. And I would say, when you're making that bad stuff, share that stuff too. There's a really great concept at Pixar that they talk about sharing your ugly babies. And you have to be able to just come to your little circle of trust and not wait for the grand reveal. Don't try to polish everything to perfection before you start sharing it. Like, get that early work in progress stuff in front of people and share that as well. Because you can noodle and polish, and you might be polishing something that sucks, so yeah, get those early ugly babies out in the open.
And I even add something with Brad, is look to your right, look to your left, look at everybody's sound design in that room. Everybody's an asset to each other. Many times companies compete with each other, but the reality is, to the whole arc of your career, you're going to be inspired. I've been inspired by both Shannon and Brad. I'm huge fans, and I think that there's brilliance, and they may do something, they may go, I'm not going to do that, but triggered an idea. Ooh, I'm going to go chase that idea. So all of your friends, whether you're working with them or competing against them in an artistic way, there's so much wonderful brilliance, and you've got to have your network, and you've got to have the people who you rely on, and I think it's the most important things throughout your career, because in reality, in your career, you're going to work for a number of people over your career, and it's going to change and evolve. But we all kind of have this weird little niche of sound designers in our business that we go, ooh, what are they doing? That's kind of cool. I like that. So you get inspiration everywhere. By everybody in the room, you'll be inspired by.
Yeah, there is no progress in a vacuum. You can't chisel away in your room and progress the way you can with feedback from your peers. And it's a safe place to get feedback, because once you have clients, it's a different ballgame.
Thank you so much, Scott, Shannon, and Brad, for your time and expertise.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, gang.
Thanks for all the submissions.
Yes, thank you to the submitters. Thank you to the game audience. Thank you, everyone, for attending this year's GameSoundCon Demo Derby. Anybody left in the chat if you want to say anything or have any comments for the questions or comments for the judges, now is the time to ask and put those in.
I was just going to respond to Jack to your question. Sorry. Do you have an example of a time that was particularly challenging? I can't think of a specific time, but I want you to know that each new project presents its own unique challenges that unfortunately never goes away, or fortunately. It's those challenges that make you better as a designer, having to come up with new ways to approach your design.
Yeah, I'm experiencing a challenging day today. I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like I'm starting over. I think one thing that gets overlooked a lot with sound design is that I feel like there's this expectation for sound designers to just, oh, like you do sound design, so you should be able to sound design anything, right? But we don't do that with visual artists necessarily, right? Like we have character artists and we have texture artists and we have people that specialize in certain things, concept artists, environmental artists. But if you're a sound designer, you're kind of expected to just be able to, oh, you could do a car game, or you could do a car chase scene really well, or you could do this fantasy sci-fi thing. And you very well may, but it's going to take you a long time to kind of build up that repertoire. I know it took me a really long time, and I was afforded the great opportunity to work on a lot of different genres. So you kind of had to get thrown in the fire, and every new project was like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done a tactical shooter, whatever it might be. So I think it's just putting in the reps and just giving yourself opportunities and challenging yourself to do demo stuff like this with a lot of different genres, and just so that you can be ready for whatever company might be ready to take a chance on you, regardless of what genre they're working in.
To add to what Brad was saying, I'd also like to add that as sound designers, I believe we're artists, not just sound people. And like composers and like everything else, our job is to take sounds, create emotions, create tension. We talked about tension release in there, but also to just research. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not. And one of the greatest things I thought that I've been able to do in my career is to be able to research. Whether it's a game or whether it's a movie, the research is the best part of it. If I'm doing dragons or if I'm doing creatures, what's been done? What else can I bring to the game? What unique, is there anything unique about the characters that I'm creating? And that's really the most fun part. And sometimes it's all about subtlety and nuance, and other times it's just outright full tilt boogie.
Let's see.
Scripting. Yeah, I mean, scripting is mixing, and I think learning how to script as a skill, absolutely, because how the sounds are going to be used. It's interesting is when you look at the genres between, let's say, post-production editing and games, the designers a lot of times will create sounds, but then how they're being used, when they're being used, how they're being integrated. I love that art form. I think it's fantastic, because not only that, you could come up with 1,000 sounds, but now how they're going to be utilized, how the music's going to play, how masking issues, mixing issues. I think that there's a massive art form that is still growing exponentially in regards to integration and scripting. And yes, all sound designers should learn how to integrate.
Yep. Brad, Shannon, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I would agree. Like, there's no harm in being smarter and having more skills and knowing things. I mean, it takes time and it takes practice. As I understand it, the hardest part of learning some of this stuff is just not having access to, working game builds or things to actually connect your Wise project into. But I think, there's always, it's been a while since I've popped open the the demo projects for Wise and things like that. But I know that stuff exists. I've got to believe there's a gajillion resources online that can help you. At the end of the day, as Scott mentioned, we're artists, we're sonic artists, we're painting with sound, right? That's first and foremost what you need to be great at. You can you can learn the more technical bits like that over time, and through teammates and online classes and stuff like that. So that's all to say, yes, it's good to know scripting.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about having the control over how your sounds are playing back in the game in context. So the more you are able to guide that process, the better. I will say, in the beginning, as you're learning your craft, I think you can learn both skills at the same time, but don't get down on yourself if you don't have a natural inclination towards the integration side.
Yeah, when he's saying, I think that's C+. But yeah, the tools we all learn, always change. They always evolve. And what game engine or what integration side constantly changes over a career. And the workstations, whether we started with Waveframe, Pro Tools, Reaper, Nuendo, Weiss, Fmod, 5, Unreal 5. So now all of a sudden there's a lot of, they're all tools. And it's always good, like, to me, I'm a guitar player, so am I going to play a 335 and play a Les Paul? Am I playing a Strat? What am I doing? They're all kind of the same thing, but I play them differently. And I think that as you learn one tool, the next tool is a lot easier. You go, great, I know I can pitch, I know I can do this, I know I can do envelope following, I can do LFOs. Okay, where do I find that on this new beast? Okay, where do I find this? So if you jump to Krotos or you jump into other types of things, you're always looking for a lot of the same food groups. So learn one. Obviously, you need the artistry of the creativity of why are you making those choices. I think why is a huge thing at any given point. Why are you putting the sound there? What role does it play? Is it adding detail and texture? Is it a boss creature? And now, it's creating a lot of tension, and it's just got to be awesome sounding. The more you learn, I mean, it's going to be a lifetime of learning. All three of us have been doing this a really long time, and I don't believe there's ever a point that we stop learning.
I actually have a manual open right now for something that I've never used before, so it never stops.
Yeah. And also, I fall asleep sometimes reading manuals. But sometimes YouTube, and I've said that before, but oh my God, there's so much wonderful stuff. If anyone is using SoundMiner or Radium, it's really a great tool. And so many people, and online chats, and people are asking, hey, what about this and what about that? And so combination of social networking and online, it's just a wealth of great information and great networking. Any of you participate game jams before?
What exactly are game jams?
I don't know what game jams are.
I think that's like, folks get together, multidisciplinary group of folks with the intention of creating a game within a, predetermined set of time, like, 48 hours or something like that. I think I got that right. Is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, all experience is great experience. I don't think there's anything, any reason not to participate in stuff like that. If you feel like that the experience is going to give you exposure to, folks that you haven't worked with before, that may be your peers down the road, or, maybe in a position to offer you a job or vice versa. I mean, expanding your network is always great, right? So that's one big plus of that. Plus you're getting, like real world experience. You're making a thing. It's debatable whether or not the thing will be good or not, and that's kind of besides the point. I think the goal most of the time, from what I understand, is just to finish the thing, under this banner of everyone's learning together, and you're putting yourselves in situations where you're kind of forced to problem solve in a very short amount of time. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you're, a whole lot of muscles that you're working in that 48-hour span or whatever. Teamwork, collaboration, as well as obviously the craft skills. So yeah, I think it's great. I've never personally participated in any, but I'm old.
Sometimes it's interesting. As artists, visual artists, sometimes one of the training techniques is you have a limited time to sketch something. Not all the time you need. Quickly sketch something. Kind of fun to do also in sound design too. It forces you, young people, young designers, a lot of times are paralyzed by indecision. Oh, that's good sound. Oh, wait a minute. It might be that sound. Oh, or wait a minute. There could be, and then next thing you know, why is it taking you so long to create a sound or get a sound or find a sound? Because you're not sure what's the right one, what's not the right one. And sometimes the bigger the library, the worse it is, because you have all these great choices. I think sometimes going in, you know what? That's a great sound. I think that's a great element. I could manipulate it or just use it as is because it's the right sound. Then use that.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Shannon. I learned a ton from everything that you guys had to say, and the chat was a gold mine of information as well. So I'll try and get bits of that up on this recording later. And yeah, thank you to the attendees and everybody for participating. I hope we all have a great, a fun GameSoundCon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks to all the folks that did demos. It was a lot of fun.
Definitely. And if anyone's around, I'll be at the party tonight. So if anyone's listening, woo!
I will see you there.
Get in out of our studios. Woo!